Emma and Dean, two high schoolers, head to Trinidad on a school trip, but they lose the group and end up alone on a deserted island. With only each other to rely on, they must team up to survive, while their growing emotions complicate things. Emma, a disciplined and diligent student, wakes up early and gets ready for school. She reviews her packed schedule before heading out. Meanwhile, Dean, a quiet and rebellious teen, rolls out of bed, freshens up, and dives into video games, ignoring his dad Jack's warning not to be late. When Emma and her little sister Stacy arrive at school, their mom Barbara drops them off. As they get out, Stacy mutters jealously that Emma is the favorite. Inside, Emma bumps into her best friend Lizzie, until star quarterback Stephen Sullivan surprises her with a greeting. Lizzie squeals over the quarterback's attention and playfully ribs Emma. In class, Mr. Christensen reminds everyone the Trinidad Sanctuary trip bus leaves at 7 a.m. sharp, just as Emma rushes in late after Dean crashes into her, sneering, "Oops, prom queen." As Mr. Christensen talks up the trip's significance, Lizzie whispers to Emma that Dean only made the cut because of his dad's cash, then shoots him a mocking glance. The teacher then reveals the best part: 3 whole days soaking up the island's culture, sparking cheers from the class. At lunch, Lizzie gushes to their friends about Emma and Stephen's morning moment, pushing them to bond on the trip. Emma brushes her off, saying they should stay focused. As Lizzie raves about Trinidad's carnival, Emma notices Dean slicing an apple with his knife, irritating Lizzie even more. Helen jumps in, saying she used to go to school with Dean and insists he's decent. Lizzie rolls her eyes, but Jude backs Helen up. Just then, Ms. Collier storms over, confiscates Dean's knife, and drags him to the principal's office for breaking rules, while Dean just shrugs it off. Lizzie argues that Emma shouldn't waste time on guys like Dean when a star quarterback is into her. The next morning, Emma packs her bags, thanking her parents, Barbara and Phil, for letting her go. Meanwhile, Jack lectures Dean, reminding him how hard he fought to get him on this trip despite his school troubles. Dean resists at first but finally agrees to go. At school, Mr. Christensen shouts for everyone to board the bus. Barbara warns Emma to stay safe, just as Jack gives Dean the same speech. On the bus, Stephen checks on Emma, but when Lizzie teases her afterward, Emma just shrugs it off. After hours of travel, the group reaches Trinidad. Miss Collier gives them free time before dinner, with activities starting tomorrow. Emma and her friends hit the pool, running into Stephen. As they laugh and splash, Emma spots Dean watching silently from a balcony, just before Stephen pulls her close. Dean turns and leaves. The next day, the students begin constructing a school for Trinidad's underprivileged kids. Dean pulls a reckless move, irritating Stephen, who grumbles to Emma that he'll wreck the trip. Later, Jude bursts with excitement. Stephen invited them all to a carnival party on a boat. Emma quickly hangs up on her parents, fibbing that Miss Collier is enforcing lights out. She hesitates, but her friends pressure her into going. At the party, the girls eagerly climb aboard the boat until Emma spots Stephen making out with someone else. Hurt, she turns and walks off without a word. As Emma walks past Dean, he asks if she's with Stephen. Irritated, she snaps that it's none of his business. Just then, the police show up, telling everyone to head to the front of the boat. Suddenly, Emma slips and falls into the water, but only Dean sees her. Hearing Emma call for help, Dean quickly jumps into the water, and they swim toward a nearby dinghy. He cuts the rope tying it to the boat, not wanting more trouble. Emma wants to go back, but he assures her they'll be fine and can follow the ship later. However, a huge storm is heading their way. Dean and Emma struggle to keep up with the boat when they realize the dinghy has no motor. Suddenly, a massive wave rushes toward them as they cling tightly to the dinghy. The next day at the hotel, the trip gets canceled because of the party the night before. Lizzie tells Collier that Emma never came home and assumed she was with someone else. The teacher asks if it's true, and Lizzie insists that Emma isn't the kind to disappear. She adds that her best friend was last seen on the boat that night. Meanwhile, on the dinghy, Emma and Dean drift into the Caribbean Sea. Dean checks his phone, but it's ruined by water. He tells Emma to try hers, but she has no signal. At the hotel, Christensen takes attendance and realizes Dean is missing too. Out at sea, Emma tells Dean they should have just followed the boat. He disagrees, saying they only had one paddle, which sparks an argument. In the middle of their fight, she spots an island, and Dean quickly starts paddling toward it. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Christensen and the police question Emma's friends. Collier asks if there's a way to find the two students, but the police say they'll likely find their way back. Lizzie worries since Emma isn't adventurous at all. Meanwhile, Dean and Emma paddle with all their strength and finally reach the island. Emma checks her phone again but still has no signal. Then, Dean spots a flare gun in the dinghy and decides to keep it. At the same time, Jack hears about his son's disappearance and rushes to the school, where he meets Barbara. Just then, Phil arrives in a hurry. Worried, the parents talk to the principal, but they're disappointed with his response. Meanwhile, Emma and Dean search the island for shelter. As they venture deeper into the woods, they stumble upon a stunning blue lagoon. Excited, Dean asks Emma to take a picture of him, but she refuses. She's worried about getting into more trouble, which could affect her acceptance to her dream university. Dean, however, thinks her concern is pointless. After hours of walking, they reach the island's edge but find no one. Feeling hopeless, they decide to retrace their steps as Emma grows anxious about how they'll survive. Dean then spots a cave and borrows Emma's phone to use as a flashlight. As they explore inside, a swarm of bats suddenly flies out, forcing them to run. They end up drenched after falling into the nearby lagoon. Afterward, they return to the shore, only to find their dinghy missing, with just one life jacket left behind. Determined to get home, they search the island for the dinghy, but come up empty-handed. As the sun sets, they take a break, exhausted. Emma tells Dean to fire the flare twice to signal for help, but he seems lost in thought, staring at the view. Curious, she asks what's on his mind, but he dodges the question. Suddenly, she remembers the food she packed in her bag. Excited, she finds it and shares some with Dean. Meanwhile, at the airport, their parents wait anxiously for their flight to Trinidad to search for them. That night, the two camp by the beach. Emma asks why Dean calls her prom queen, and he explains that she's like a perfect girl in a perfect world. Suddenly, a twig snaps nearby, but Dean reassures her they'll be fine. Hoping for reception, Emma checks her phone again but still gets nothing. Noticing she's cold, Dean offers her his shirt. In a comforting tone, Emma says their families will come to rescue them. Not long after, Emma hears rustling in the distance. By morning, Dean finds her at the shore, writing SOS in the sand. He asks about her phone, only to learn its battery is dead. Dean then goes for a swim, and Emma can't help but watch him. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Christensen informs their parents that the police have started searching and found a missing dinghy on the boat. With their children gone for 2 days, Jack offers money to speed up the search. Christensen apologizes, but Barbara insists they do everything to find their children. Meanwhile, Stacy calls her parents, asking for updates on her missing sister. In a somber tone, Phil tells her they haven't found her yet. On the island, Emma goes to a nearby river to get water when she suddenly hears strange noises. Feeling uneasy, she quickly decides to leave for her safety. Emma resumes writing SOS in the sand while Dean keeps stealing glances at her. They survive by eating whatever they can find on the island and eventually build a small hut for shelter. Exhausted from the day, Emma sees Dean already asleep. She lies beside him, and as he turns toward her, his hand rests on her waist. Finding it comforting, she doesn't move away. The next morning, while Emma showers in the lagoon, Dean casually asks her for sunscreen. Emma tells him to check her bag, but he says he can't find any sunscreen. Feeling uneasy, she mentions that something else might be on the island. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Barbara anxiously watches a news report about Emma's disappearance. As Phil packs his things to return home to Stacy, Barbara remains hopeful, reassuring him that they will find their daughter. Phil pulls her into a tight embrace, trying to comfort her. With the official search called off, Jack arranges a helicopter search the next day, and Barbara joins him. Meanwhile, on the island, Emma shares how much she misses her family. As she struggles to start a fire, Dean suddenly discovers a skull nearby. Shocked, Emma breaks down in tears, overwhelmed by their situation and feeling completely hopeless. Dean assures Emma that as long as they stay together, they'll make it home. Feeling comforted, he kisses her passionately. As night falls, they share an intimate moment, but Emma suddenly tears up, admitting how much she misses home. By morning, she wakes up alone. Worried, she calls out for Dean but doesn't see him anywhere. Concerned, she heads into the forest to look for him. Thankfully, she finds him carefully burying the remains of the person they discovered the day before. Confused, Emma asks Dean what's wrong. He tells her he doesn't need anything from her, leaving her disappointed. She tries to get him to open up, but as she moves, she accidentally falls and injures her knee. Dean quickly helps and treats the wound. As Emma is reminded of their dire situation, Dean reassures her that they'll be okay. Trying to lighten the mood, she then jokes that they both need hydrotherapy. After their bath in the lagoon, Dean opens up about his mother's death in a car crash, revealing that he only found out 3 days later after waking from a coma. Emma listens closely and gently assures him that none of it was his fault. As rain starts to fall, Dean finds joy in it, and Emma shares his happiness. They dance together in the rain, laughing and forgetting their worries for a while. Dean then picks a flower and gives it to Emma before they share a deep, intimate kiss. Nearly a month later, the news officially announces that the search for Dean and Emma has been called off. Outside the school, Emma's friends watch the news report, refusing to believe she's truly gone. Meanwhile, Barbara remains determined to find her daughter and joins Jack on another helicopter search. To widen their efforts, they distribute flyers around town with details about Emma and Dean. However, Jack eventually tells Barbara that they've done everything they can. Heartbroken, she reluctantly agrees. With deep sadness, she returns home, still without any clue about her missing daughter. At the shore, Dean shares a story his mother used to tell him about a green flash that appears on the horizon just as the sun sets, something he's never seen himself. Weeks go by, and the teenagers embrace the beauty of nature around them. They swim in the sea, dive beneath the waves, and enjoy their time together. Their bond deepens, filled with affection and passionate moments. One day, Emma remarks on how different Dean is compared to how he was at school. She then admits she's always been interested in him. Smiling, Dean confesses that he used to watch her from afar, admiring her just as she did him. Deep in the forest, Emma sleeps peacefully until the sound of an approaching aircraft wakes her. Dean hears it too and rushes to the shore to grab the flare, only to realize it's missing. Emma quickly catches up, but the plane is already too far to hear their cries for help. Desperate, she runs back to their hut to search for the flare, but it's nowhere to be found. A chilling thought hits her. Someone else is on the island, stealing their belongings. Days go by, and they still haven't been rescued. Sitting in their hut, they talk about venturing deeper into the forest to survive. Suddenly, a deep growl cuts through the silence. Dean immediately heads into the forest to investigate, while Emma, worried for his safety, follows close behind. As Dean turns to his left, his heart nearly stops. A black panther stares back at him. He sprints away, but before he can escape, he trips and falls. Moments later, Emma arrives, gripping a bloodied knife. The Black Panther lies motionless beside her. Weeks pass, and life moves on for everyone, though the teenagers remain missing. Over time, Emma and Dean adapt, learning to hunt, gather food, and build a sturdier hut deep in the forest. On a large stone, Emma carves more tally marks, counting the days they've spent on the island. As they survive together, facing every challenge side by side, their bond grows stronger. Before they know it, Emma and Dean have fallen even deeper in love. The next day, Emma feels unwell, and Dean jokingly asks if she thinks she's pregnant. She confidently denies it and lies down beside him to rest. As they chat, something suddenly falls from above, Emma's missing belongings. Looking up, they spot a mischievous monkey tossing their lost items at them. Among the scattered things, they finally see the flare gun and quickly retrieve it. Desperate for rescue, Emma immediately fires the flare. Furious, Dean argues with her, insisting he wants to stay on the island. The heated exchange ends with Emma, frustrated and disappointed, walking away from him. A little while later, as Dean hunts for fish, Emma approaches him and apologizes. He forgives her, and they reconcile, their bond stronger than before. Suddenly, a helicopter appears in the sky, spotting them on the shore. Moments later, they are rescued, and the news of their survival spreads rapidly. At the airport, their friends and families rush to greet them with warm hugs and smiles. However, while everyone celebrates, Emma and Dean don't seem as happy as expected. Later, Dean visits Emma at her home, unable to stay away from her. Emma and Dean sit together, reflecting on how strange it feels to finally be home. As Dean leans in for a kiss, Emma pulls away. Instead, she invites him to their homecoming party the next day. The following morning, at the party, Emma's parents give a heartfelt speech, welcoming the rescued teenagers. Meanwhile, Stacy notices Dean standing apart from the crowd and asks why he isn't mingling with everyone. He simply replies that he's not the type to fit in with the rest. Stacy chuckles and remarks that, unlike him, her sister has always been popular. During the party, Dean silently mouths for Emma to come with him, but she refuses. Disappointed, he walks away. Life slowly returns to normal, and both Emma and Dean are back in school. Emma's popularity soars, while Dean remains an outsider. Whenever they pass each other in the hallways, they exchange fleeting glances but say nothing. A few days later, Emma tries calling Dean, but he doesn't pick up, choosing to ignore her call. In Emma's room, Stacy opens up to her sister, admitting that while Emma was gone, she enjoyed the attention but eventually realized how much she truly missed her. Emma smiles and reassures Stacy that she's amazing in her own way. Touched by the moment, they decide to go to prom together, strengthening their sisterly bond. The next morning, Dean visits his mother's grave. With a proud yet bittersweet smile, he softly tells her that back on the island, he finally saw the green flash. On prom night, Dean sits at home watching TV until his father walks in and casually asks if he wants to borrow a tuxedo. Meanwhile, at the party, Lizzie takes Emma by the hand and leads her outside for a surprise. Standing there in the rain is Dean, dressed in a tuxedo, waiting for her. Overwhelmed with emotion, Emma steps out of the party and runs straight to him, kissing him passionately. As the rain pours down, the two happily reunite, dancing together under the night sky.